that it's not making the money that's been portrayed, and that Qantas International is losing the 200 million. They're the substantive issues that we said the audit would look at.
But for instance, I have a search out of Singapore for New Star Investment Holdings Proprietary Limited. It's a company with $600,000 worth of Singapore dollars of shares. Mr. Buchanan, you're a director of that company.
That's correct.
You've been a director of that company since the 8th of April 2009.
That's correct.
Can you tell me what the purpose of that company is?
The purpose of New Star Holdings is it's the holding entity for both Value Air and Jetstar Asia, which are two airlines in Singapore that are owned by New Star. They're both Singaporean airlines, and New Star is a holding company of that.
So any funds that go into that, they're subject to the same auditing levels of the Qantas Group?
Yeah, absolutely, and they're also audited not only to the Australian standards but also to the Singapore standards and the Singapore statutory results as well.
But what's the purpose of that? So the purpose of that company is to operate Value Air and Jetstar Asia, is that right?
It's historical. What happened was when Jetstar Asia was started, it was started as a separate airline, and then subsequently there was a merger with Value Air, and because the two airlines continued to operate, had to under some of the traffic bilaterals, especially to Indonesia. They kept the two airlines and two operating companies running, and that's the holding company that holds both of those individual airlines.
Can I just go to issues of crewing? And Mr. Buchanan, we did have a conversation a few months ago after Lateline ran a story about Thai-based flight crew. One of those flight crew has since not had his contract renewed. Your company says that it's due to other factors. If I were to say to you that he was told by the company, the Tourist Asia, that if he spoke out, his entitlements would be withheld from him. Is that something that would concern you?
That's something that would concern me, and I'd be happy to take that on notice and investigate further. I mean, as we investigated on that particular incident, I was comfortable in terms of the four cabin crew that were part of the original claim. Three of them contracts have been renewed. I know one of them has not, and that's in relation to performance issues. So I'd be happy to take any further information you have on notice and investigate it further.
Is Jetstar subject to an investigation by Fair Work Australia in relation to overseas-based cabin crew that work within Australia?
There's two investigations going on by the Fair Work Ombudsman at the moment, yes.
And what is the policy that I was told that, for instance, Thai and Singapore-based cabin crew, there was a night in July in Darwin when there were 37 of those crew staying at a Darwin hotel to be deployed on flights within Australia. Would that sound about right to you?
I have no idea. I can take it on notice, though, if you want me to investigate a specific day.
But you have a situation where there are where if it's an internationally tagged flight, you think it's appropriate for there to be overseas-based crew on those internationally tagged flights?
I think what's important is you look across our network. We're running around about 3,000 flights a week now, and we operate almost 200 flights domestically each day. We have around 5 to 6 flights a day that start off in a domestic port, and the aircraft goes through to international destinations. And the domestic tags, if you will, that go on that feed those international flights are part of those international flights, and they help actually create a viable service internationally. And they're primarily through two ports, which is Darwin and Cairns, and they help build what becomes very successful and viable services.
I'm just trying to understand this. Those overseas-based crew spend most of their time either flying in or out of Australia, based in Australia. You'd agree with that proposition?
I think that there's two separate issues here, one of which is the domestic tags, as you're referring to, or what we call international flight tags, which is an aircraft that starts internationally. And I said there's 5 or 6 of these a day that start internationally. The aircraft goes through a point in Darwin or Cairns, which creates that regional tourism impact and comes to other points in Australia.
Can we just pause there? Because there are some flights where you clear customs, for instance, JQ58, Singapore, Darwin, Cairns flight, you clear customs at Darwin, and then you put domestic passengers on it. There are other flights, well, you don't clear customs rather, but you can put domestic passengers on it. It's predominantly an international flight. But there are other flights where passengers disembark in Darwin, they clear customs, and it's still tagged as an international flight using those foreign-based crew on contracts of $400 a month.
I think first and foremost, the $400 a month is nonsense, and is something we have absolutely, and I've said to you many times, is completely incorrect. I mean, my example of that, it's like saying that the taxi driver that gets a $2.50 flag fall is all he earns. I mean, these people are earning $2,000 plus a month, and to refer to their income of 10 or 20% of the total component of the salary as their income is completely false.
Could you
And
provide on notice details of what an average overseas-based flight attendant would be earning?
Happy to do that. And what I'm also happy to say is that our Thai cabin crew are paid 10 times the average salary in Thailand. They're paid 17 times the minimum salary in Thailand. And then we recruit some of the best. We have the lowest turnover, the highest engagement in Thailand, and we are paid, as I said, at some of the managerial levels in Thailand. So to say otherwise, and to not take into account the fact that our operations in Asia, 2/3 of our flying is outside of Australia, and we're a successful Australian business competing in Asia.
But Mr Buchanan, those Thai-based crew who are earning much less than Australian-based crew, they are subject to different rules in relation to fatigue management, aren't they, and their duty roster hours?
Absolutely not.
You're absolutely sure about that?
Absolutely not.
Could I ask you to provide, without breaching any confidentiality, the roster for your overseas-based crew for flights in and out of Australia for October and this month? I
can give you all the average stats. I'll tell you, for instance, I look at the average hours of each roster and the average hours of each base.
Yes.
The average hours range between 27 and 30 hours total a week, and flying hours around 20 hours. And it's very similar across each of the bases. The average duty length for someone in Bangkok or Melbourne or any of our other bases when they're flying internationally is almost identical. They all come in at about 10.5 hours.
Average hours includes time that people have off work. It includes flight attendants that actually are based, office-based, that don't fly, is that right?
It includes, I'm just talking about the active average duty time for people flying, and the base times are almost identical.
I'd be grateful if you could provide that roster. Mr Joyce, can I just go to the issue of Qantas International Operations? You've indicated your frustration and that it makes a loss, according to the view you've put forward. Have you had any discussions with members of the Qantas board about closing down Qantas International?
We haven't had any discussions about closing down Qantas International.
Not at a formal board level, but at an informal level.
No, we haven't. We have had discussions about what are the range of solutions that we need to look at in terms of Qantas International. We have had a look at closing down routes. We've had a look at scaling back the losses. But we fundamentally believe that Qantas International is a very important part of the entire group. We fundamentally believe that we have to fix Qantas International and grow it again so that we can continue to have an amazingly strong domestic business, an amazingly strong frequent flyer business, and that we can continue to invest in our product. We're spending $2.5 billion every year on new aircraft. 38% of the capital that we're spending is going into Qantas International. We need to turn that business around. We're not going to walk away from the business. We want to fix the business. And the best way of fixing the business is to implement the plan that we outlined a few months ago about the restructuring of the entire business, leveraging alliance partners, creating an Asian hub for a premium carrier to recover the significant loss of market share that we have. And I believe that that plan will turn around Qantas International within 3 to 5 years so we can start growing it again. That's our plan. We don't have any plans to walk away from it. We think it's so fundamentally important to this country. It's so fundamentally important to Qantas that we need to fix that business.
But you are planning to shrink the flying kangaroo out of a number of routes in and out of Asia and Europe, aren't you?
We have made an announcement about the significant loss-making routes that we have into London, and we have scaled back from 4 services a day to 2 services a day in London from next April as a consequence of the significant losses that were occurring there, which were unsustainable. But I will say, and this shows our intention, that we have, for example, in Heathrow, it's a very slot-restricted airport. The slots, you find it very hard to get. We've asked British Airways we've rented the slots to British Airways for 3 years, because my belief is we will turn around Qantas International in 3 years, and then I can start building those services back up. And British Airways have protected those slots for us. We didn't hand them back. We've kept our strategic options open. We would have only done that if we had the strong belief that we would recover International back and start growing it again.
But, Mr Joyce, isn't that inconsistent with a letter sent from Tony Whelans, the General Manager of Group Government and Industry Affairs, to Ms Sue McIntosh, the Executive Director of the International Air Services Commission, on the 11th of October, where it cites, for instance, on the Germany route, As part of the renewal, Qantas seeks a variation to add conditions enabling capacity to be used by any wholly owned subsidiary of Qantas and be used by Qantas to provide services jointly with any wholly owned subsidiary of Qantas. The same for the Hong Kong route. The Thai route, also the Japan route, and other routes in Europe. You're familiar with that letter, aren't you?
I'm not familiar with the letter, but Tony Whelan's here, and if I can talk to him for a second.
Well, this is pretty fundamental. This is about...
But can I say the intention? I mean, Tony, there's various complexities, Senator, with traffic rights, where you have to actually, apply.
Chair, I wonder if the witness could be shown a copy of this letter.
You want to table it?
Yes, I'd like to table it, Chair. And I've got copies.
As such, Senator Xenophon.
Well, Tony's just clarified what I thought was the case on that, Senator. There's no intention with that note and that application for the replacement of any Qantas flights. What that is enabling us to do is to allow us to put the Jetstar code, Jetstar Australia's code, Jetstar Asia code onto those international operations.
That's not the case. That's not what it says. It actually says, and you're getting a copy of the letter, it says, Qantas seeks a variation to add conditions enabling capacity to be used by any wholly owned subsidiary of Qantas and be used by Qantas to provide services jointly with any wholly owned subsidiary of Qantas.
Can I categorically say, that we are not replacing Qantas and the Frankfurt with Jetstar? What this is allowing us to do... Or Hong Kong.
Or Thailand.
Or Thailand. What this is allowing us to do, Senator, to be clear, the technicalities involved in traffic rights are hugely complex. And asking for access to capacity doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to operate your own aircraft, or as we say in the industry, your own metal. What it does allow you to do is use these code-share arrangements. And the code-share arrangements helps these services because what it does is allows us to use the extensive Jetstar network that's developing in Asia to sell that around the world and actually put more traffic on the Qantas services into Frankfurt. It actually strengthens the Qantas services into Frankfurt, and it's done for a positive reason to make sure that those loss-making services actually improve. So the interpretation is wrong, Senator. It's not designed for us to use a replacement of Qantas aircraft with Jetstar. It's actually completely the opposite to allow us to actually strengthen it.
Can I just ask a couple of questions in relation to the grounding of Qantas last Saturday? As you went into the AGM just a week ago, last Friday, what prospect did you think that there would be a grounding of the fleet that you announced just a day later?
I didn't have any view on the prospect of a Senator. What I did is I went.
You didn't have any view at all?
I went into the AGM, and as Lee Clifford said at the AGM, we had to believe that this could be a watershed moment because there was a lot of debate and dialogue going around that the unions believed that the management and the board were going to be rolled by the shareholders at the meeting. At that meeting, we had overwhelming support from the shareholders. We had 97% support we had 97% support for the resolutions and for the directors. We did think that